Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Kirachem Aval Banim, Richam Adonai Yereav. We learn in the book of Psalms. As a father has compassion for his children, so may Adonai our God have compassion for all the family and friends of Paul Gould, who we come here to remember this day. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over us, and we are no more. But we trust that Adonai's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children endures age after age, unchanging. We begin our service by reciting Psalms, thus linking Paul's life to our ancient tradition, to the Jewish people, and to the eternity of God.
Shir Lamarot Esaina Yerim Me'ain Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Ose Shamayim Ba'aretz Al Yitain Lamot Raglecha Al Yanum Shomerecha Hine Lo Yanum V'lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai Shomerecha Adonai Tzilcha Al Yad Yeminecha Yomam HaShemesh Lo Yakeka V'yareach B'layla Adonai Yishmorcha Mikol Ra Yishmor et nafshecha Adonai Yishmor tzedcha v'orecha Me'ata ve'ad olam.
I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? This is a question the psalmist asks thousands of years ago, perhaps at a time of sorrow like this one. And here was his answer. My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, for your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection and your guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from harm and guard your soul. For Adonai guards your going out and coming in, now and forever. And I'll invite our colleague, Rabbi Rachel Schoenfeld of B'nai Tikva, Beth Israel, with whom Paul and Ada have a deep connection with, to lead us in a psalm in Paul's memory.
Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever.
In synagogue on Shabbat, we are currently reading from the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, the third book of the Torah. But it's writing the first book of the Torah that we learn that when a loved one passes away, members of the family come forward to share memories and reflections. And it's that ancient tradition we continue here today, as first we'll hear from Paul's children, from Ari and Cheryl and Josh, and then we'll hear from Susan, and then finally from his granddaughter, Liat. Josh, Cheryl, Ari.
I'm going to do this. I don't have to tell any of you how much I love my father. I called often and visited frequently, being fortunate enough to live so close by. Our time together was special, whether it was sitting in his room singing, watching the Eagles or Sixers, or having his favorite chocolate ice cream from Rita's outside on his porch, which he relished in. We were together. We were together. Our conversations included politics, the news, and updates on how Liat, Ariel, and my mother, Penina, were, and Phil, and how they were all doing. As time passed, and the politics got dark and the news got dark, we spoke less about that and more about ourselves. He was so proud of Liat and Ariel and their accomplishments. Ariel working one-on-one with special needs students. He was so proud of you. And Liat working as program director in Jewish life for Temple University Hillel. Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, was so meaningful to him, and he was beyond thrilled also to hear of her most recent acceptance to graduate school for her master's in social work. So excited. And also to hear that, yes, she and John were still together. That made his day. Dad was a humble man, a simple kind of guy who asked for very little. He never complained and enjoyed life. These last 2 months were tough and challenging, but Dad rallied on and was a trooper and hung in there till the end, till the bitter end. I had my phone and we YouTubed, they're laughing at me. FaceTimed with laughing to the Three Stooges, who we absolutely loved, and Abbott and Costello, What's on First, you know that, and singing Frank Sinatra. As Melody said to me, he brought me in, and I took him out, and I was with him. I am beyond grateful to have had so many years with Dad, cherishing and holding my now memories close to my heart. Rest in paradise, Daddy, I love you.
Technology. It's here somewhere. To say my father was a man of few hobbies would be an understatement. He had none, to my knowledge. He considered activities like playing cards or watching TV shows frivolous, and he preferred to focus on the news. He read the Times and the Inquirer every day, was keenly aware of current events and politics. Dad was tuned into the many injustices in the world and would regularly remind us how lucky we are to have been born at this time and place. He frequently railed against those in power who valued their personal wealth over others who were less fortunate. His belief system was driven by a compassion for humanity, and he instilled that quality in all of us. One of the few times I remember having an argument with him, and there weren't many, was at a Thanksgiving dinner at Cheryl's house. He was animated over a specific social injustice, which I can't recall at the moment, and I thought that we should save the limited time we had while we were all in town together to focus on just the positives in our smaller world. Boy, did I get an earful about my priorities, and it forever highlighted for me what's most important for us to impact while we're here on this planet. Dad didn't really have an ego. He didn't care what people thought about him. He didn't look for attention. He didn't strive for promotions at work or have any interest in cars or dress beyond utility and practicality. It was always about family, education, living according to Judaic principles, being dependable and steady at work, and being financially secure. Work was something he did to provide security. You know that take your kids to work day that gives children a peek into what their parents do? We never got an invite, and at some point, when I told him I wanted to see his office, he laughed in that Paul way, like, why would anyone find this interesting? Only years later did I learn that he was trained to shoot a gun, and he told me about the meetings he had with shady businessmen applying for casino licenses when he confronted them on the legitimacy of their finances. He liked his word predictable, his world predictable. He took the exact same vacation every year, a week at LBI. No sense trying other stuff. It was relaxing, terrific for the kids, low-key, and we all remember that gift fondly. He was not a man of flash, but he was a man of fire. His passion came out from time to time, usually fueled by someone getting screwed just because of the color of their skin or the lack of access to social services. He had a couple other pet peeves that would also set him off. You know how some people happen to have voices that carry more than others? Going to a restaurant could always be an adventure. If we were sitting within earshot of someone like that, I'm frankly amazed that he never got arrested or into a fist fight, at least not to my knowledge. His most common trigger, though, was not toward anger, but toward song. Any word at any time could remind him of a lyric, and he'd launch off into song. About a year ago, I took him on a car tour of the places that he'd lived. We went to Strawberry Mansion, Pennsauken, Cherry Hill. We stopped in front of the house on Cherry Hill Boulevard. There were a couple kids looking out the window at us, and a guy in his 30s came out of the house trailed by his kids. We explained our connection to the house, and 2 minutes into our conversation, a word on this guy's sweatshirt reminded Dad of a song from the 50s, whereupon he proceeded to serenade everyone with verse and chorus. And then when he finished, he smiled and pointed to the guy and said, "And that's free." He had a love for music, Jewish music, choral music, three tenors, hell, any tenor. He sang in the choir and went year after year to the Catskills with Ada to be immersed in Jewish music. He loved the setting, the people, the harmonies, and the beauty and the sound of our voices in song, and he loved sharing that joy with Ada. He loved his family and his extended family. He would do anything for us. In many ways, he lived for us. For my mom, who he supported fully as she took on Hebrew teaching and other jobs while raising us, and as she started her own business. He was financial advisor, real estate advisor, and stable force encouraging her initiative while most of his peers at the time would feel threatened by an entrepreneurial wife. He lived for his kids, who he put through school, gave our first down payments for our houses, and loved talking about all our accomplishments. He lived for his grandkids, who he loved seeing and hearing about school, work, and life. And he lived for his wife, Ada, and her extended family. Ada and Paul shared a deep love for each other. It extended his life, and we're forever grateful for that. Dad was one of a kind. He was loving, spirited, practical and grounded. He was generous and compassionate. He had an unwavering sense of right and wrong. He was the most honest person I'll ever know and had a wicked, dry sense of humor till the very end. He appreciated everything he had, the life he lived, and he kept everyone laughing. We are who we are because of him, and he will live on in us.
It's hard going last without being redundant. So when I think of my dad and how to describe him, the word mensch immediately comes to mind. I decided to look up the definition of mensch. We all know what it means generally, but I wanted to see what it actually says. It's a person of integrity and honor. So I went a little bit deeper, look up the definition of integrity. Integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. And that's why I think that it epitomizes my father. Strong moral principles was something he always had, never wavered from. If he saw an injustice, he would get so angry. I remember one time that he was watching the TV and some politician came on and was given, the song and dance and started yelling at the TV. Another time, we went into a car dealership. This was many years ago, and I'm not sure if it was to buy, a car, rent a car or something, but I do remember what happened. We were in there, and the car salesman was negotiating and they were doing the back and forth, and one of those things where good cop, bad cop, I'll come back, I get new numbers and that, and then finally my dad said, I'm out of here, I'm done, with some choice words as part of that as well. So that was my dad. He stormed out, no bull around Dad. Honesty and integrity was his definition. He was also very sensitive. I got a little bit of it. That's a good thing. Sometimes people say, oh, you're so sensitive, like it's wrong or bad or something. Sensitive is a good thing. It means you're touched, right? You care about something. Something hits your soul when you're sensitive, and Dad was very sensitive. I think a lot of his qualities were passed on to both myself and Josh and Cheryl, and in turn, Ellie and Evan, Ariel, Liat, and Kobe, as well as Ada and Ada's grandchildren as well. He touched so many of us, as we can see by all the people who are here. Dad had a lot of love as well. He didn't always express it in physical terms, but he loved my mother and our family. And later in life, he met the love of his life, Ada, who he spent the latter years of. And Ada meant so much to Dad, and Dad meant so much to Ada. I would come sometimes and visit from Colorado, and they would very graciously invite me into their home. And Ada would always make sure that she cooked the dinner, and dinner was there on the table, and we had just a great time together. So those are wonderful memories, and I saw how much they loved each other. Josh already mentioned about the Catskills. God loved singing. Boy, he sang till the very end, and he and Ada, they rejoiced at their singing when they would go to the Catskills and come back. They even shared with me one time one of their CDs from one of their concerts up there. And so that was very important to him as well. He was singing up to about a week ago. And his sense of humor, he always had these one-liners up until about a week ago as well. Why I oughta. And recently, a caregiver came into the room and said, well, first of all, Dad had an issue. I think he had I learned this term yesterday, misophonia, which is a phobia of loud noises and stuff. And Josh intimated to that a little bit about being in a restaurant. But yeah, he had real sensitive to loud noises. And so that someone would come in, to a nurse or a doctor would come in and say, hi, Paul. How are you doing? And he'd look at him like, what are you doing? I'm right here, you know? You don't have to shout at me. Do you know where you are? I'm in a bed. And then another time someone came in and said, Paul, I'm just here to take your blood pressure. How are you doing? How do you feel with my hands? That was Dad. Always had the one-liners. So when I think of my dad today, and I see him singing, just a week and a half ago, he was singing Sinatra, pumping his fist. And as the song went forward and it came to an end, his voice was the loudest and strongest at the end of the song. Never complained at the end. And the thought in my mind, it brings a smile to my face that that's how I'll always remember Dad.
Now we hear from Susan.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, reiterate that my mom and Paul loved each other very, very much. And it was beautiful for us to see, my father had passed so many years previously, that my mother had a second chance at real, true love. And they had a very loving, caring, and affectionate relationship. And Paul's sense of humor always came out. It was mentioned about Paul and liking singing with my mother. Interesting beginning, that's how they really got together. They were both in choir together. Then they went out for tea together to soothe their throats after choir. One thing led to another. It wasn't really a date. They were just going out for tea. But then true love blossomed, and the singing kept going as to Zamir, to synagogue choirs, to each other. And that was something very special. Paul was also very proud of my mother. It was mentioned about Paul, Tikkun Olam, and what his social justice. Well, my mom, since the 50s, she was very involved in social justice issues through Brotherhood. And Paul was so proud of my mother for continuing with the Brotherhood Assembly and her dedication to Paulsboro High School. He supported her. He was there. He was always a big champion for her. For many years, they were able to celebrate Shabbat together, and that was very important. Paul would always be pre-Shabbat, bring my mom flowers every week. And then they would light the candles, recite the Kiddush, and then the motzi. And then, of course, they had Shabbat dinner. It was very important for them to honor the Sabbath together. Paul shared in all the Rosen events. He was kind of a bonus grandpa to our whole clan. Michael was only 5 months old when my father passed. So all the grandkids, he was bonus grandpa. That's the grandpa they knew. And he was there. And God bless him, he went to dance recitals. I mean, you got to really be something to go to dance recitals. And he went to dance recitals, everything from dance recitals, graduations, to all kinds of simchas. And he treated my sisters and I and the grandchildren with a lot of love, respect, encouragement, and pride. He was so proud of all of us. It was mentioned that they did many singing, Paul and Mom did many singing adventures together. They traveled a lot together. They went to Alaska. They went to Israel and sang for Israel's anniversary. And they traveled to Colorado to see family. They tried up and down the East Coast. They went to Florida. They had a lot of really good adventures together. And it's a really big loss for our family. He's been there for a long time, and we all loved him so much. And he was just, and all those little funny attributes that have been mentioned, we all appreciated. especially Rachel had such a thing with Paul, and she was like the first grandchild to recognize that he was a keeper. And our family is truly mourning the loss of such a kind, loving, and caring man. Thank you.
And finally, we'll hear from Liat.
Hello. Wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. So Saba, Hebrew for grandfather, was a true Saba. He was a real man of the people. He always rooted for the underdog, spoke out against unfairness in the world, and he never took life too seriously. His endless jokes and sarcastic quips never ceased. Even in his last few months and even few weeks, he was cracking jokes and singing Frank Sinatra to his nurses. I'm grateful enough to have had most grandparents through my mid-20s. Not many 25-year-olds can say that. Living in Cherry Hill, Saba and I had a close bond. We talk American and Israeli politics at just about every Shabbat or holiday dinner. He'd say, "They're all stupid," and wave his hand in disgust. Saba was there for so many milestones. He was supportive of every summer at Camp Ramah, and he was there to see me graduate from his alma mater. He was there to watch me grow as a Jewish professional working for Hillel, and he held on just long enough to learn that I got into graduate school. Saba was truly there for it all. It's hard to imagine a world in which Saba does not exist. August 27th is going to look a little bit different this year, but I know we'll all get through it together. Saba, thank you for everything. I love you always, and say hi to Zeke for us.
Thank you to Cheryl and Josh and Ari and Susan and Liat for sharing those beautiful memories and stories about Paul. You know, in the Jewish calendar, we're currently in the midst of counting the Omer, counting the days from Passover to Shavuot. And there's a custom to study a chapter of Pirkei Avot, a collection of ancient teachings from our sages, every Shabbat afternoon during the counting. And this Shabbat, we study the fourth chapter of this wonderful collection of teachings. And it is in that very first Mishnah, the first teaching of this chapter, which made me think of Paul. That's because it speaks to the type of person that he was. Ben Zoma asks, Ezehu Ashir, who is rich? And he answers, Hasameach bechalko, one who is content with their portion. That was Paul. He was a good and honest man with a strong sense of right and wrong, a great sense of humor, and a great singing voice with a deep love of music. Paul was happy with his portion, and of course, his portion included his beloved family. His wife Ada, with whom he shared much joy over the last 2 decades, and also with Penina, with whom he started a family. His children, Josh and Melody, Cheryl, Ari and Diane, as well as Ada's children with whom he became a father to them as well, to Debbie and Jay, Judy and Stephen, Zichrono Livracha, blessed memory, Susan and Len. And Paul, of course, also adored his grandchildren, Kobe, Liat, Ariel, Ellie, Evan, and Jacqueline and Alex, Harris, Paula, David and Rachel, Hannah, Rachel, Michael, and Allison, and of course, also Raphael. Paul was also close with Phil, and with many other family members and friends. Paul was truly sameach b'chelko, happy with who he was and his blessings in life. And though we are all saddened by his loss, we are grateful for the love and the lessons that he leaves that we remember today. Paul grew up in Jersey City with his parents, Reuben and Celia. He was an only child, and he didn't have too many extracurricular activities. But he did receive his lifelong love of music and, of course, his beautiful singing voice from his mother. Paul went to college at Temple, where he studied accounting, and this led him to a career with the IRS, and then later, after he retired, with the Gaming Enforcement Commission in New Jersey. And Penina, you recalled meeting Paul when you were at Temple. You said you met through mutual friends, though at the time he was dating a girl whose brother you were dating. But that didn't stop you from getting together. And after Paul graduated, he moved to Florida to be with his parents, but you continued to write letters to each other. And when he came back to Philadelphia, your courtship started for real. You were married in 1951 and spent 35 years together, raising 3 wonderful children and remaining close. Sameach b'chelko, there is much joy that you shared together. Then, of course, Ari, Cheryl, and Josh came along, and we heard from them many beautiful memories about their father, ways in which he impacted their lives and the lessons that he left them. I'll just add from what they said, too, is how much they appreciated how he helped them become who they are today through his support of Penina when she worked as a secretary and to the director at Camp Ramon, the Poconos, for 8 years. He was content to be home alone and come up on weekends to visit. And also, of course, education was so important, making sure the 3 of you were able to get your own educations. Sameach b'chelko. Not only was Paul content with who he was, he did what he could to help his kids to achieve their lot in life as well. And as we also know, what made Paul happy with his life, his lot in life, was Ada. Now, Susan shared the story of how they met. Ada, I'm going to add a few details from what she told me the other day. They did, in fact, meet over tea, but it wasn't only after choir was also at Ada's sister-in-law Shirley's house of blessed memory. She would invite Ada over for dinner on Saturday night, and Paul lived right across the street, and she would invite him over for tea. And that tea led to conversations, which led to dinner together, and of course singing together and going to classes together. And after a time, you decided to get married. The wedding took place at TBS. It was officiated by Rabbi Lewis and Rabbi Lindemann. And when I looked in the family file, which has all sorts of wonderful things in it, I found, we'll get to some of those later. But I found a couple of important pieces in here. One are the remarks that Rabbi Lindemann made at your wedding. And at your wedding, he spoke about your beautiful relationship as Re'im Ahuvim, beloved companions, partners in your love of Yiddishkeit, music, learning, Israel, and family, and the beautiful relationship that you had together that would only grow and blossom over the years together that we've all been blessed to see. You traveled together, as we heard, and Paul enjoyed organizing those trips. And of course, there was singing together too, the Zamir choir, the summer festival, singing in Israel. And your voices also helped lift up our choir, Makelat Beshalom, at TBS. And now, Paul had been a member of our choir for many years before, and in that same file, actually found this letter from Rabbi Lewis, thanking Paul for his singing during the high holy days. It's dated October 13th, 1978. Listen to what Rabbi Lewis wrote. Dear Paul, I want to thank you in my name and in the name of the congregation for having exalted all of us. Through your voice, but even more through your heart, you made the services a rich, meaningful experience. You set a beautiful tone. It was against this backdrop of heart and voice that we were able to raise our voices in prayer to the Lord on high, to the throne of the Creator. For your cooperation throughout the year and for your devotion and dedication, we thank you. Cordially, Rabbi Albert Lewis. And there are many Shabbatot that I recall hearing Paul and also Ada singing in the rows where you would sit right in front of the lectern that I spoke at on Shabbat. I have to be honest, Ada, I often heard Paul's voice more than yours. But whenever we walked by with the Torah or on Shabbat at Kiddush, he always greeted me with a smile and a joke, and sometimes his opinion on this or that. And you also, of course, have a deep connection to B'nai Tikva, B'nai Israel, and the community there. And Ada, you and Paul brought so much joy to each other, to your families, and your communities. And he was so proud of your accomplishments and the life that you built together. There's much to be samech bechalko, happy with the lot that the two of you built together. As Susan said, Paul became a big part of the Rosen family, sharing in celebrations and becoming a big part of your lives. Also, Shabbat was important for them, and Paul, Ada mentioned to me just before the service, she reminded me that he celebrated also his second bar mitzvah, in addition to Shabbat, many holidays and everything else, and what a wonderful occasion that was too. And Debbie added how she always respected how Paul lived by his Jewish principles, and had no problem expressing his opinion about life or what was going on in the world. Though Paul could get passionate, he modeled integrity and fairness, and this was a wonderful example he set for everyone. And this, of course, included his grandchildren. Liat shared on behalf of all of them their love for their Saba, and Ariel, you recalled how he used to babysit you and Liat. And though Paul could be reserved, he always knew that he cared. Josh, you added that your dad took great pride in all of his grandchildren, how they're doing in school and this professional path that they took. And Debbie, you mentioned how Paul enjoyed playing with Raphael. Certainly, Paul had much to be joyful when it came to his family and his legacy. In Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma cites a verse from Psalms to support his teaching that the one who is rich is the one who is happy with his portion. That verse reads, "When you eat the labor of your hands, happy you will be, and all will be well with you." Paul ate the labor of his hands. He lived within his means, was happy with his family, his job, his friends, and his community. Though these last 2 months have been difficult, he was blessed to have his family caring for him. And Paul truly understood Ben Zoma's teaching. When we reflect on his life, we know that he was sameach bechalko. He was happy with his portion. And now, even though he's gone, Paul's example will continue to teach us this lesson. And by learning it and living it, we'll ensure that his memory will always be for a blessing. We rise for a final prayer.
El male rachamim shochein v'amromim hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina b'malot kedoshim u'torim k'zohar harakim asirim et nishmat Paltiel ben Reuven betzira shalach l'olama began Eden tehem enochato Anna bal rachamim hastireu beseter kenafecha leolamim Utzror b'yitzror ha'chaim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato V'yanuach v'shalom al mishkavo V'nomar amen, amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Paul Gould, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. From here, we'll head to Crescent Memorial Park in Pennsauken for the burial. This evening, the family will be joining the TBS Evening Minyan on Zoom. There'll be an opportunity after that service to share stories and memories about Paul. The link for that, the Zoom link for that, can be found on the Temple Beth Shalom website, and you're welcome to join and share your own memories and stories about him.
Pallbearer, please step to the center aisle. I'll ask if we can rise once more, please.
A season is set for everything, time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time for planting and a time for uprooting, a time for hurting and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up. A time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for crying and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering, a time for embracing and a time for refraining. A time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for letting go, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time for speaking.
I'll ask you to kindly remain seated, please, just for a moment. Folks in this row, if you get your head to our cars, please. Folks in this